Panoorin natin to, updates from CBC regarding the Lapu-Lapu festival just before the election. Yeah.
Here's what we are following today. Well, nearly 3 weeks after the tragedy at the Lapu-Lapu Street Festival in Vancouver, today the city will be providing an update on the preliminary report, and that is looking into public safety of outdoor events, keeping in mind as we head into summer and more festivals will be happening. Now, Mayor Ken Sim and the Vancouver Police Department, they'll be providing information and also presenting the initial staff report on this response. This is something that the mayor had promised to do after that tragedy happened. And we will be taking you there live to discuss this. I just want to take a moment to have some background here on what happened. So, it was on April 26th where 11 people were killed and dozens more were injured after an SUV drove through the crowd. And what you're seeing right now is, of course, the memorial, the flowers, the candles, the way that people poured in condolences for this tragedy. And this was again at the Lapu-Lapu Day block party in South Vancouver. Organizers had said that this festival was all about celebrating the contributions of the Filipino-Canadian community. It was what police had called the darkest day in the city's history. Witnesses there had told CBC News that it was like a war zone. Police said that these victims, they range from 5 to 65 years old. Memorials, again, lined on Fraser Street. I was there yesterday, just in this area, walking around and seeing what people had done, and all the flowers, all the stuffies, as you can see, all the notes of solidarity and being together. Now, when it comes to the suspect, Kaiji Adam Lowe, 30 years old, has since been charged with 8 counts of second-degree murder in connection with that incident. Lowe had also received mental health care from a Vancouver coastal health team, and Premier David Eby had said that the authority had described him as being compliant with his medication and having no history of violence. Now, what unfolded at this festival charged many calls to improve public safety. The provincial government has appointed a former Chief Justice to conduct a review of event safety measures and provide recommendations for future events following this Lapu-Lapu Day incident. And of course, as I had mentioned earlier, the City of Vancouver as well. So it's committed to conducting its own internal review on an event safety. And festival organizers across Metro Vancouver and BC also said the tragedy will not stop people from gathering and celebrating this summer. So we just have word that the press conference is beginning now. Let's take you there live to Mayor Ken Sim.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here today. I do want to acknowledge that we're hosting today's press conference on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and I do want to thank them for their generosity and their hospitality and the love and care they show this land that we get to live, work, and play on. I also want to acknowledge all of my teammates up here, be it the City of Vancouver, VPD, Vancouver Fire and Rescue, the Vancouver Police Board, and my teammates on council. Now, before we get started, on behalf of everyone standing on stage with me today and everyone who's part of the City of Vancouver family, we do want to extend our condolences once again to the families of the victims, people that were injured, anyone who was at that event. It was a pretty traumatic incident, and we know a lot of people are hurting and are suffering, and we just want to extend our thoughts and our love your way. Now, on April the 26th, our city experienced an unthinkable tragedy, one of the darkest days. In fact, I think it was the darkest day in Vancouver's history. Families and friends came together to celebrate culture and community, and instead they were met with devastation. 11 lives were lost that day, many more injured, and our city was left in mourning. And so in the wake of this tragedy, we knew we had to act. And that's why I immediately called for a joint review by the City of Vancouver and the Vancouver Police Department, not just to understand what happened, but to ask the hard questions, to look at our systems, and to make them stronger. I asked for a preliminary report to be presented within 2 weeks. The report we're releasing today is just a first step, a factual overview of how public outdoor events are planned and permitted in our city, what planning was done ahead of the Lapu-Lapu Day celebration, and what changes are already underway to enhance public safety. This review is also about learning and making immediate changes to keep people safe at public outdoor events, whether it's a block party, a parade, or a cultural celebration. Based on the info gathered and reviewed to date, the preliminary report shows that the proper safety processes were followed ahead of the Lapu-Lapu Day festival. The event was well organized. All the right steps were taken, including multiple reviews, site walks, and coordination with first responders. But that doesn't mean that those steps were enough. And that's what this moment demands, a rethinking of how we assess risk, how we respond to emerging threats, and how we ensure people, no matter where they are in this city, feel safe gathering in public spaces. One of the most urgent challenges we now face is how to protect people from the growing threat of vehicles being used to cause harm. It's a very deeply unsettling reality, and it's forcing cities around the world to rethink what safety looks like in our streets, at our events, and in the public spaces that we all share. Immediate following the April 26th incident, our team at the city and the Vancouver Police Department quickly reassessed security. It's okay. Reassess security for the Vancouver BMO Marathon. As a result, 2 additional heavy vehicle barriers and 40 mobile vehicle barriers were deployed to strengthen protection along the route. Similar safety measures were implemented at the BC Buddhist Festival with more police officers on site and additional bollards installed to protect attendees. These were the first of several immediate changes. Since the incident, the city and the Vancouver Police Department have been working to develop new tools to enhance event assessment to consider gathering size, layout, location, road access, and other emerging risk factors. We're also updating a centralized database to track and monitor risks across all upcoming events, improving coordination between city departments, the Vancouver Police Department, first responders, and event organizers. And to enhance on-the-ground safety, the Vancouver Police Department has invested in new mobile vehicle barriers, which are highly effective tools used in other cities these devices have just arrived, and they can be deployed quickly to prevent vehicle-related incidents, whether accidental or intentional, at public gatherings. We're also working closely with organizers of upcoming events, reassessing safety plans and adapting our responses where needed. As we await the findings of the province's Commission of Inquiry into Community Event Safety, we will review and consider their recommendations into a final comprehensive report this summer. But let me be very clear today. Vancouver is a city built on connection, a city of vibrant neighborhoods, rich cultures, and moments that bring us together. That spirit runs deep in who we are. And while this tragedy has shaken us to our core, we will not let fear define us. We will not let it divide us. We will stand together, We will keep moving forward together, united and unafraid. But we do owe it to everyone. We owe it to those who we've lost. We owe it to every single person who calls Vancouver home to take every step possible to prevent a tragedy like this from ever happening again. And while this is an incredibly painful moment, an incredibly painful point in time for all of us at the City of Vancouver, it's also a moment of learning and for change. And that's the work we have ahead of us, and that's the work we're committed to doing. So thank you very much.
Thanks. We'll take questions. If you can line up at the mic, state your name, outlet. You can do a question and a follow-up. If we have time, we'll do a second round. Thanks. Please direct questions to the mayor, the city manager, or the interim chief of police.
Hi, guys. This is something that came up in the tech briefing. Had you had these vehicle barriers, would you have used them at Lapu-Lapu? It sounds like there wasn't anything that gave an indication that this would have been a risk. So obviously hindsight's 2020, but Chief, is this something you would have deployed?
As one of our members stated at the technical briefing, hindsight is 2020, and nothing indicated for any change with the organizers from how well this event went the previous year. It was classified as a family-friendly event, and the risk assessment would not have warranted heavy barricades.
So much of this is hindsight is 2020. How can you go about predicting the unpredictable? How is it possible to ensure safety for large events when something can happen that is almost impossible to predict?
Do you want to start? No.
You can't be in the hearts and minds of every citizen anywhere in the world. We will look forward to seeing the recommendations. We are already working ahead of the recommendations on planning vigilance, and we're going to work hard to ensure every venue is safe, every patio, every through street is safe. And as the mayor said, we're a vibrant, diverse city, connecting neighborhoods, and we're going to ensure public safety for those events and continue to connect the city.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, you're absolutely right. We cannot predict what's in the minds of every single individual, but we're not using that as an excuse as well. There are things that we can do to react to make this place safer, and that's what we did. And so you can look at what happened. Literally the next morning, there was the Vancouver Sun Run. There was a reassessment there. With the BMO Marathon, there was 2 heavy vehicle barriers and 40 mobile vehicle barriers as well. More policing at the Buddhist Festival. And we will continue to bridge that gap until the report comes out.
Bonjour, Julie Landry, Radio-Canada. With that preliminary report, what are the changes imposed to the organizers of events right now? Immediate changes imposed? Are there any?
Well, on the interim report, there is nothing that will be imposed on us. The final report and the provincial review or commission from the province could impose. And we'll obviously, our own city report, the recommendations will take on full value, but nothing has been imposed on us as of yet.
And you said it in the place of there. What has changed for you at the VDP since then that you're self-imposing?
Self-imposing is, where, regardless of the cost, if an organizer of a community event feels anxious or nervous and would like presence, we will have presence there. We will support the community to help us get through this phase. So that's what.
Hi there.
Good morning.
Not sure who is best to answer this, but I guess just in terms of increasing security at these events, like, you said that obviously this is a city of connection, we have so many events. How important is it to balance kind of the increase in security, depending on what these reports yield, with making events welcoming? Like, in the past years, there's been criticism that sometimes event security has felt too heavy-handed. So what's being done to kind of make sure you get that balance right?
Do you want me to start or do you? Yeah. You know, I'll let the acting chief talk about the actual security of it, but there has to be a balance. That's the reality. I think we can all agree that, you know, even if it was, you know, operationally and fiscally possible, I don't think we want to live, you know, in, you know, a police state per se, right? It defeats the purpose of what we're trying to achieve here. And, not but, and we take public safety incredibly seriously. And so the onus is upon us to make sure that we do the right security assessments and, you know, we strike a balance. And, you know, that's what we'll continue to do. But let me be very clear as well. It was the darkest day in Vancouver's history. And I think, you know, the city of Vancouver lost a bit of its innocence on April the 26th. And that's just the new reality. And so we do have to strike a balance where, you know, people can feel safe celebrating festivals and their culture in the city of Vancouver in a safe manner.
Sure, the key word the mayor just used is balance, because 100% you're correct that there are community organizers that do not want a police presence, a heavy police presence. So balance is the key. That, you know, technically that could mean anywhere from a wider perimeter. It could mean low visibility police presence. Lots of things where the organizer would be assured their safety without being imposing as a police state kind of feeling to it.
With the rise of the far right, and there's just so much hatred right now towards certain communities, I'm just thinking of the upcoming Pride festivities. I'm curious if police are doing any kind of extra intelligence gathering, or if there'll be any additional kind of security measures for that particular event.
Pride is one of the top 8, 9, 10 events that we deploy very robustly for. I mentioned earlier in another briefing, you know, Visaki's like that, and some of the other bigger parades. So 100% there'll be extra resources, energy put into collecting intel if there's anything indicated that we need to up our resources, which will already be at a very high level.
And Jen, just on that as well, I want to be very, very clear as well. Pride is incredibly important. It's a beautiful community, one full of love, and the last thing they should worry about is, you know, public safety. So I know I speak for all of City Council. We will be there, and we'll be supporting public safety initiatives, and you know, the community won't have to worry. They'll be able to celebrate. All right, thank you.
Just to speak to the risk profile of the event itself, Acting Chief, could you maybe explain what VPD did respond to that day prior to the incident at the close of the festival? I understand it was 2 very kind of minor events.
What you're referring to is earlier on, some weeks ago, so in that district, we have 4 districts in the city. That's District 3. At any one time in any district, there's probably over 50 officers already deployed doing general patrol duties. So and when this incident occurred, this tragedy occurred, we were there within, you know, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, very quickly, because we had officers in those neighborhoods. And part of the daily duties outside of this event, they assisted in the area. And I believe there was a few incidents. One was helping, there was a lost child, and somebody had forgotten where they had parked their car, so our members assisted the person. So we were there. We're always there in every neighborhood, in every district.
Thanks. And so you've promised to deploy members if any organizer says they want a presence this summer. Do you have the staffing and the budget to do that?
What I'm saying is, if there's a community event where the organizers do not feel assured and have concerns, we will address it either through attendance, increased patrols, some sort of equipment. But our goal is to help the city get through this with confidence, and in this period of assurance, we're going to do everything we can to support the neighborhoods, family events, bringing the community together. So we'll be there.
Sorry, just to clarify, like you are going to screen these requests. You're not just going to have a blanket deployment at any
That's right.
festival.
That's right. We'll screen them. We'll work with the organizers, as was mentioned earlier. Not everyone wants the police at their event, and we're going to respect that.
Going once? Going twice? Okay, that's a wrap today. If anyone needs further questions or follow-up, media@vancouver.ca or media@vpd.ca. You should have the info bulletin in your inboxes. Thanks for coming today. Have a good one.
And we just heard there from Mayor Ken Sim updating on the preliminary report onto public safety and outdoor events. Sim had said that in the wake of this tragedy, officials knew that they had to act fast. And we also know that this includes updating a database for city departments. Vancouver Police Department also said that it's investing in new mobile barriers. And the city will look for more recommendations to finalize that report as well. Ken Sim noted that for the Lapu-Lapu Festival, proper safety processes were followed, that the event was organized, and all the steps were taken with coordination with first responders there. So that was just the first look at what the city and the VPD are hoping to do. And we'll have more reaction coming in on this with our reporter, Yasmin Renea, who's at the press conference, and as well as community reaction from festival organizers too. So meanwhile, as we wait for that, just in light of this incident, there, of course, have been worries, concerns about how to make these festivals safer. Summer festival organizers in Vancouver say that safety is a major focus as they urge people to attend these public events in the coming weeks. And we had Mira Baines, who looked into the questions that are being raised over security and the use of vehicle barriers. Take a look at this.
Event safety practices are top of mind as organizers of events across Vancouver promote upcoming festivals. One of the largest events in the city is the Celebration of Light this July.
So today, we look ahead with hope.
About 400,000 people each night flood Vancouver's West End in the downtown core and Kitsilano. Now, safety measures are under scrutiny in light of the tragedy at the Lapu-Lapu Day Festival in South Vancouver last month. A man is accused of driving his SUV into a crowd of people at the Filipino Cultural Festival on April 26th, with mental health issues being investigated as a possible factor. An event organizer with the Celebration of Light Festival says they have a robust safety plan that's looked at year-round.
There's going to be renewed scrutiny on it, but we're very confident working with our partners.
He says he's open to being part of conversations with the province over festival safety.
There's a technology of a rapid deployable vehicle barriers, the vehicle mitigation barriers, and the city recently has purchased some of those, but it's not a very big number.
An organizer with the Italian Day Festival on Commercial Drive says security is in the hands of police.
In 2018, there happened to be some controversy that played out in the media about whether or not Italian Day had too much security. And again, that's something that we leave to our partners at the VPD.
People we spoke to weighed in on attending large community events.
I like to tend to stay near the back of crowds so I can see what's happening around me. But I'd be very careful.
I think they did a good job with the sun run and barricading the streets.
Yeah, obviously hope it doesn't happen again, but it's not going to prevent me from participating in the community.
The Premier has announced a former Chief Justice will report on safety measures for event organizers by June 30th. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
All right, some perspective there from community and organizers. We also just heard from Mayor Ken Sim, who provided an update again on that preliminary report looking into public safety of outdoor events. Now, Sim said in the wake of this tragedy, officials knew that they had to act fast, prioritize changes for upcoming festivals. Let's take a moment to break down again what we just heard. Yasmin Renea joins us now from that press conference. Yasmin, you were listening in there. What stood out about what Ken Sim said?
What stood out to me, Benit, from what the mayor said is that the preliminary report shows that all the proper protocols were in place before the Lapu-Lapu tragedy, that all the events, all the steps were taken to ensure that the event was safe, including site walks, permits, closing the road, and coordination with first responders. But of course, the mayor says that doesn't mean that those steps were enough. Obviously, we saw what happened, just the massive tragedy, massive loss. And this tragedy was called the darkest day in Vancouver's history. And so the main message today was that officials really want to step up security with all the big events that are scheduled for this summer and moving forward, that there needs to be a balance between ensuring safety and ensuring that community members can get together, Benit.
And we did hear some of those steps that were mentioned. So can we just go over what are the key priorities the city is taking to improve safety so far?
So one of the things that it's doing is that it's updating a centralized database that lays out all the safety risks of events that are happening in the city. And also, before the Lapu-Lapu tragedy, the city had actually, or the police had ordered these mobile vehicle barriers to block vehicles from, driving through events. And so these are massive barriers. They're about 700 pounds. And so those actually just arrived yesterday. There's 16 of them. And so the plan is to use them for these events. They weren't ordered because of Lapu-Lapu, but obviously now I think more event organizers will want them at their events to ensure safety and to prevent something so tragic from happening. And these barriers also, the city says, they will be used for FIFA when the city hosts some FIFA World Cup games in 2026, Benit.
All right, Yasmin, and looking ahead, as we just mentioned, summer's coming up, lots of festivals that are going to be continuing to happen on the streets of Vancouver and across BC. What happens next?
Yeah, and Ken Sim says there needs to be a balance because, of course, safety is top of mind for people. They want to ensure that their community members are safe, but they also don't want to be in a policing state, Ken Sim says. So there needs to be that balance. So the city's final report will come out sometime in August. Until then, police say that event organizers, if they are wary of public safety and they want some police presence at their events, they can make those requests and the police department will screen them and do their best to either have officers present at those events or maybe some increased patrol. So they said that, it doesn't matter if there is a low safety risk as long as people feel safe and that the police department will absorb that cost. In addition to the city review, the provincial government has ordered its own review, and that will be conducted by a BC Supreme Court former justice. And so those findings are expected to come out in June, Benit.
All right, thank you so much, Yasmin, and we'll continue to have reaction on this press conference. Thank you. And many continue to feel the weight of this incident. Again, 11 victims who have died, and the condolences and respects have poured in at the memorial on near Fraser Street, again near John Oliver Secondary School. Let's just take a look at that for a moment. Many memorials have been set up to remember and reflect on these victims. Candles have been lit. Flowers have been placed to honor victims. Temporary memorials have also been set up along Fraser Street, but also in Kensington Community Centre. Groups across BC have arranged vigils, masses, and mourn together. And it just really shows you how many people here in Vancouver and in Canada and across the world even have really banded together to pay their tributes to this tragedy. And also, we want to take some time to provide some reaction to this press conference today. So as the city aims to improve public safety, festival organizers, they're keeping a close eye on what's going to be done in the future. Today, the Shipyard's night market is going to be beginning, and Mike Bleakley, who is the COO, is joining us now. So, Mike, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. So initially hearing Ken Sim there, what stood out to you?
To be honest, I haven't been briefed on his statement. I've been busy setting up our event here. We're on site early in preparations of our security upgrades.
Okay.
So I apologize. I don't have a statement on Ken Sims yet.
Yeah, well, I can just tell you, the Vancouver Police, they are investing in new mobile barriers, 700 pounds, 16 of them that will be out there. They're saying that, even if organizations are anxious about the cost, that they're willing to still show up and have provide that safety for them. But, as you are there now setting up, tell us what you're looking out for. How are you preparing?
Well, we've been preparing for months. We already have to submit a comprehensive security plan to use the shipyard space. In light of the recent tragedy, we have been working with the city to bolster what's in place by adding cement barriers, including some steel barriers that are mobile, and they'll be inserted in place once we're all set up. That would prevent anything like that from happening here. And on top of that, there's already natural bollards in place and, natural security within the area that will keep our patrons safe.
And how overall are you feeling about, ensuring public safety at your events so that people who are coming, they feel good about coming out?
I'm 100% confident in providing a safe space for everyone to gather and feel comfortable. So like I said, the natural construction and infrastructure that's around here provides a safe barrier, and how we've blocked off the access points and how we're controlling our vendors and load in and load out through throughout the day will be it is much more enhanced than it has been in the past. So our vendors and patrons will be totally safe here.
And just curious, Mike, has the VPD been in touch with you leading up to this event for any extra protections?
They have not. And no, we are in North Vancouver, so we have reached out to our CMP, and I know that they've been working with the city liaisons who we deal with to implement the security upgrades to the site. And we're trying to get them to come down in a non-intrusive way. We want the event to look and feel like it did last year, but at the same time provide comfort and safety for everybody here. So we welcome the RCMP to come down, and they usually do. Every year they come down every Friday and walk through a couple times. So I anticipate we will see them tonight.
All right, Mike, any last words just for people who are wanting to come out as the new season approaches and people want to get out and about and explore their city? What do you have to say?
Well, I say we encourage you to come down. We can vouch for the safety and the upgrades of this area, and we have to enjoy ourselves. So patrons need to just get out there and not live in fear. That was a very isolated incident, which complex issues there that are way above what us as organizers can do. But we can only provide a safe space, and we have done that down here at the shipyards, and not just our event. Other events that happen down here have the same security protocols placed against them, and so all organizers will be following these steps, which are they look very efficient.
Mike, it was so great to hear from you. Thank you so much for your time and insight into this. Take care.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And if you are just joining us now, we've been hearing from Mayor Ken Sim and the VPD providing that update on the preliminary report looking into public safety of outdoor events. This was in the wake of the Lapu-Lapu Day tragedy. And here's what else we're keeping an eye on today. So in a show of across-the-aisle support, BC's health minister and a BC Conservative MLA, Eleanor Storko, they're cooperating over changes to BC's mental health system. They're both backing a private member's bill aimed at preventing suicides, where hospitals are required to provide notice to a family member before a patient is released. And Eleanor says this was influenced by gaps in the system. In some high-profile cases, the person went on to die by suicide shortly after being discharged.
We have found, common ground, and government has agreed we're going to move forward with developing a standalone policy document that helps provide more clarifications around engagement and communication with family members on admissions and discharge, and undertake the right consultation that needs to be done, of course, with First Nations, Indigenous peoples, and with service providers and others, and do that important work.
Health Minister Josie Osborne says changes will be made requiring better communication between healthcare teams and patients who are being supervised under the Mental Health Act. And some people with disabilities and their advocates are expressing concern about Prime Minister Mark Carney's new cabinet. Some of them say that without a specific dedicated ministry, work underway like the Canada Inclusion Plan and improvements to the disability benefit could lose momentum, and the community risks being left behind.
All of the concerns for people with disabilities in Canada are going to be done off the side of someone's desk, which we know, given the mandates, that's not necessarily going to happen, and we're just going to go backwards.
In a statement to CBC News, the Prime Minister office says that work will continue under the Minister of Jobs and Families and the Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture. Thank you so much for joining us. For more on this, you can go to our website, cbc.ca/BC. We'll see you soon.
$240,000. That's the number of temporary foreign workers the Canadian government allowed Canadian employers to bring into the country last year. It's the most ever on record, and almost double the number that they approved just 2 years ago. But here's another number, 1.4 million. That's about how many Canadians are without a job and looking right now. That's got some economists arguing that this program, meant to be an extraordinary measure to be used when a qualified Canadian isn't able to fill a job vacancy, that it's evolved into something else entirely.
It's really moved a long way past its intention as a program.
In the approval rate, it has gone from about 70% to now it is about 97%.
This low-wage stream has grown absolutely out of control.
And the concern is that shift is having very real, very serious consequences for the country and on younger Canadians looking for work. Let me explain. Canada's foreign worker program was originally designed to fill positions mostly in agriculture. You can think of a local farm that needs seasonal workers to help with its harvest each year. Other industries could use foreign workers too, but there was a cap, no more than 10% of your workforce. But then
we're short employees.
Reports of businesses struggling to rehire.
Restaurants, fast food, and retail in particular were struggling. They had open jobs that they couldn't fill, to the point where they didn't even have enough people to stay open. What they needed, they said, was to be able to bring people into work from overseas, open the floodgates.
There is just quite simply a tremendous amount of lobbying pressure from businesses in Canada. And so the government, at a time when there were really, job vacancies were very high, they had hit record levels, they responded to that threat by essentially opening up the system.
So the system, as it was, capped foreign workers at 10% of a business's workforce. But a couple of years ago, the government bumped that up to 20% across the board, and all the way up to 30% for more than half a dozen industries. And look what happened. This chart from the Globe and Mail shows how many workers Canadian employers were allowed to bring into the country each year to fill the category of low-wage jobs. So that's the blue line that you see here. Entry-level positions in retail, construction, manufacturing, transportation. But what's behind this big jump that you see over the past 2 years is the food service industry. Hiring of foreign workers in that category is up close to 5,000% since 2018. According to Bloomberg, in Ontario, Tim Hortons took on 58 temporary foreign workers in 2019, but last year, it was over 700.
This has been a big transformative change. This is tens of thousands of extra temporary foreign workers, particularly at coffee shops and convenience stores, ice cream places, and that kind of workplace.
Now, there are still rules in place to make sure businesses aren't just filling as many positions as possible with cheap labor. It is supposed to be a last resort, right? So, for example, they have to post the job locally first and make the case that the pay they're offering for the job is fair.
I mean, these are what we call generically labor market tests. They're essentially just a way for the government to ensure that these are genuine labor market needs that can't be satisfied locally with local labor.
And I think this is an attempt to sort of protect Canadian workers. The problem is, in practice, it doesn't work that well.
Because it's very hard to determine whether or not that's the case, whether there really aren't local sources of labor supplies.
And that's a really important point, something that's hard to verify with an application. So, for example, if a business says it had no qualified local applicants for a job, a bureaucrat looking at their application to hire foreign workers has to determine, well, what does that mean? How do I tell if someone was or wasn't qualified, especially when you're posting a job with no formal education or technical requirements?
It isn't that there's, these hard rules that must be satisfied. It is quite simply a very sort of subjective, you have to document that you have made efforts.
The experts we spoke to say it's gotten to the point where the requirements are so nebulous and there are so many applications coming in, they're just being rubber stamped.
When the probability that your application is accepted with a 97% success rate, there's really not much of a test anymore.
And if you're thinking, well, maybe 97% of applications are perfectly legitimate uses of the program, well, just look at what happens when the government does go back later to audit those companies. This is a rolling list of businesses that have received fines over the past few years for breaking the rules. And take this audit of Dynasty Produce in Cobourg, Ontario, just as an example. The company was fined $25,000 last month because the job details it wrote on the application didn't match what the job actually was. The government handed out more than $2 million in fines, just like this past year. And here's the thing. The government not only opened the floodgates in 2022, it removed the guardrails as well. Here's what I mean. There used to be a rule that applications in the food and retail sectors would be automatically rejected if the local unemployment rate was 6% or higher. So the thinking being that if lots of locals were looking for work, there should be no reason to depend on cheap foreign labor. But in 2022, the government got rid of that rule. And take a look at the city of Toronto's unemployment rate. For most of the past 2 years, it's been above 6%. And by now, almost every major Canadian city has reached 6%, some even higher than that.
If the unemployment rate is that high, it seems like there are a lot of people who could be filling these job vacancies.
One of the big concerns for economists right now is the impact all of this is having on young people.
All of these jobs are important jobs, but they're also jobs that, especially in the fast food sector, this is often, young Canadians' first jobs.
Now again, this program is supposed to be a last resort to fill jobs when there aren't any Canadian workers available. But let's look again at Toronto. There are about 120,000 people between 15 and 24 looking for work. That's an increase of 50% in just 2 years.
The CNE says they received 37,000 applications this year, the most in the X's history.
The competition was a lot because they wouldn't even read my emails, they wouldn't even call back.
On that question of callbacks, the economists we spoke to say some companies actually prefer to hire temporary foreign workers over young Canadians because they're generally more mature, they have more life experience, and in many cases, they're much less likely to complain about low pay or poor working conditions.
I mean, the research I've done shows that, there's reasons to think that employers will pitch a low wage when they advertise if the search fails, hope that the government gives them permission to hire a temporary foreign worker.
There are ways of, advertising on sites that aren't used as much, perhaps putting in some exotic type requirements and then saying, well, yes, we had 37 domestic applicants, but none of them met our needs, so we have to go overseas.
So it's not difficult if you really have a preference for the foreign candidate over the Canadian candidate to say that the Canadian candidate wasn't somehow suitable. And I think that's ultimately what the problem is with these tests.
And take a look at this. Between the time these new rules were introduced in 2022 and now, the national youth unemployment rate has spiked from around 9% to over 14%. And for young immigrants who've landed in Canada in the past 5 years, it's even worse, around 23%.
A fiercely competitive job market means young people across Vancouver are struggling to score work.
There's no question that this is negatively impacting the employment prospects for younger people.
But there's also another side to this coin, because it's also probably true that some young people just aren't applying to these service sector jobs because they don't think the pay is high enough. And maybe the pay isn't high enough because employers have access to people who think the pay is just fine.
We should keep in mind that, what they're trying to do is bring in temporary foreign workers at the current wage rather than raising their wages and trying to attract more domestic labor. So even when the program is working as designed, it's suppressing wage growth for the folks who are already in Canada.
Think of it this way. If I own a food truck in Ontario and I'm posting a job because I need someone to help me flip burgers, I'm going to post it at minimum wage. In Ontario, that's $16.55 an hour. A few days pass and I'm not getting any takers. So I say, okay, maybe I need to make the job a little bit more attractive. We're not going to pay minimum wage. Instead, we're going to pay $18 an hour. And boom, suddenly, a lot more people are interested. But what happens if I don't have to do that? And if instead I can just apply to hire someone temporarily from another country where $16.55 an hour suits them just fine?
Before we had temporary foreign worker programs, the process would be that you had to pay the competitive wage, and the competitive wage is where supply equals demand. The temporary foreign worker program, in a sense, hijacks that process.
And if wages are stagnating instead of rising, that adds up over time. Here's just how little wages in this category have grown since 2010. End to end, this is an increase of 50 cents, maybe a little bit more. And this is adjusted for inflation, but still. Now, is this solely because of the temporary foreign worker program? No. But the economists we spoke to say it is very likely contributing.
If there are jobs in the economy that Canadians won't do, maybe we should start asking ourselves why Canadians won't do those jobs. Maybe we should be asking ourselves, well, maybe the problem is those jobs just aren't attractive enough, and that needs to change.
For the most part, the businesses that rely on temporary foreign workers see all of this from a very different perspective. They say taking away these workers would mean they'd have to bump up prices, lay off staff, or even shut down altogether.
Canada, like many other countries, has become addicted to temporary foreign workers.
There may be some firms that could not survive at, if they have to raise their wage from $17 to $18 or to $19. But we have to ask ourselves, what do we want more? Do we want a handful of marginally profitable businesses to survive? Or do we want to see wages go up for hundreds of thousands of young Canadians? In my mind, that's an easy trade-off.
Some economists even go so far as to say this program has taken too much pressure off Canadian businesses, because when they know that they can hire a whole bunch of ultra low wage workers, there's much less incentive to make large scale investments, develop new processes, or adopt new technologies to become more efficient. And we know Canadian businesses are falling behind in all of those areas.
We have a labor productivity problem in this country. The way we increase labor productivity is not by working harder. It's by working smarter. It's by giving workers the tools, the equipment, the machinery, the technology that allows them to produce more every hour that they work. That's what we need.
Now, there is a broader question worth asking about who else the temporary foreign worker program potentially hurts, including temporary foreign workers themselves. But the federal government has made some small tweaks to the program over the past few weeks, and they've promised there's more to come. Now, it's not clear whether they'll roll back all of the changes they made in 2022 or try to adjust the application process. But some of the economists we spoke to said if it were up to them, it wouldn't be a question of what to change. They'd cut this low-wage stream we've been talking about entirely. So there's been a lot of talk from Canadians saying, I don't want to go to the US anymore.
This week we were planning on going, but we decided to make a different decision.
We're boycotting them for sure.
We have to stand up for Canada. You know, they're poking us in the eye, so we got to poke them back.
And there are surveys too, one where more than 60% of people said they planned to avoid travel to the US this year entirely. But again, lots of people say things. It's been harder to know how real this apprehension was until now, because the data is in. The drop is significant, and Americans have noticed in a big way.
Canadian Airlines are taking away flights to popular U.S. cities. This after many Canadian vacationers apparently are avoiding the U.S.
It is having not only a negative impact on the tourism market, but business as a whole.
We're seeing pretty seismic developments in terms of the number of people that are willing to go to the U.S. right now.
It's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking.
And here's the thing. More Canadians pour into the U.S. every year than people from any other country in the world. So we wanted to know just how much does this drop actually hurt the U.S.? Let's start with the turning point. The moment data started to show something real was happening here. This red line shows how many people traveled by land from Canada to the US between October and February of this year, compared to the orange line, which is last year's travel data. Superimposing the lines like this, you can see how this year's travel numbers have actually been higher than the previous years since October, but then the two lines split apart from each other in February, which was, if you think back, right around the time the US and Canada began phase one of a fresh trade fight.
The White House confirming tonight that a 25% tariff on Canadian imports will take effect on Tuesday.
Canadians are fully united from coast to coast to coast to stand up for this extraordinary and beautiful country.
And brand new Canadian data seems to show this sharp downturn in travel actually accelerated in March, with a 32% drop in Canadian return trips from the US by car year over year, which is also the lowest number of Canadians coming back over the border since 2022, when Canadians really had good reasons to stay home, with COVID testing, vaccine mandates, cross-border quarantine measures still in place.
A lot of people obviously voting with their wallets and saying, you know what, we're going to stay closer to home. We're not going to spend our hard-earned money there while we deal with Trump's tariffs and Trump's 51st state taunts.
And the drop in Canadians booking flights to the U.S. is pretty substantial too. According to the travel agency Flight Center, 40% fewer Canadians booked vacations to American cities in February, and 1 in 5 Canadians actually canceled their trips to the U.S. over the past 3 months.
After I get cancellation emails from my clients, some of whom have been my clients for over 2 decades, I come back to them like, guys, it's Trump, right? It's politics, it's policy, it's he being mean, and is that why the cancellations are happening? And they're coming back to me, it's 1,000%. 1,000%. It's Trump's policies and politics, and we are sorry.
And airlines are noticing, some allocating tens of thousands fewer seats from Canada to the US this April. United Airlines even going so far as to cancel a new daily route between Toronto and LA that it had planned to start up in May. So here's where the problem becomes really real, because Canada-US travel was supposed to have been ramping up right? And as we've been approaching the busiest time of year, the summer months, what happens if this drop keeps dropping? The shock could be big.
They'll be missed. I mean, we're going to feel a big impact in our pocket end of the season if they don't show up this year.
According to the U.S. Travel Association, in 2024, about 20 million Canadians either drove or flew south, and the majority of them to either New York, Florida, Arizona, Texas, or California.
Even local officials in Las Vegas are saying what's going on with Canada right now is a problem for us and growth opportunities for us.
Because just think about it. Every single activity that these Canadian visitors book, every meal they eat, every hotel they stay at, that's money being pumped into the U.S. economy. Last year, Canadians spent over $20 billion in the United States. That's twice as much as what Americans spent at McDonald's in 2024, and almost as much as what the entire U.S. gym and fitness industry pulls in each year. And not only does this amount of money help fuel local business, it also creates jobs. The U.S. Travel Association estimates about 140,000 of them. So what happens when some of that money starts to disappear?
To give you an idea in like actual dollar bills, 2024, my company grossed $35,000 exclusively from Canadian high school kids coming to New York City for their class trip. 2025, 5,000 and going down because I still get cancellations every other week. I hire 15 tour guides and they all work for me as well as other companies. My inability to hire them to do what they love, which is share their passion and their energy and their excitement about the greatest city in the world, it sucks, man. It's really, really rough.
And some American businesses make so much money off Canadians, they've actually built their entire business models around them.
Richard Clavette looks forward to Canadian snowbirds coming to Florida every year.
They create bond here and friendship.
Canadians have filled his motels for the past 35 years, but this year was different.
With Canadians right now, we're about 30%, when we should be more like around 80%. So it's a big drop.
To put this in broader terms, it's estimated about 1 million Canadians, mostly retired, travel to the U.S. every winter. And that group, they're not just staying for days, even weeks. Many of them spend months, if not half the year, south of the border, which creates an expectation from local businesses that they and their money keep coming.
I live here 6 months. This is my home, but I'm leaving April 2nd. I actually feel guilty that I'm here.
If you have approximately 1 million snowbirds going away, they're spending money on vacation rentals when they go there. They're also engaging in activities. They're going out to eat. They're doing other things locally. So you're talking in the billions of dollars.
And think about the little guy, the smaller vacation towns close to the border that might feel the financial impact the most. The Adirondacks in New York State. About 130,000 people live there full time. But figure, up to 6 times that many Canadians, 600,000 people, visit every year, both in the summer and in the winter.
We've seen individual families choosing not to come. We've heard of whole hockey teams choosing not to come to some of our international sporting events, and then some group travel bookings, bus tours, etc., have also canceled.
This is from a local Adirondack newspaper, referring to a survey suggesting 66% of businesses in the area have already seen a decrease in Canadian bookings for 2025. And their regional tourism office figures with even just a 20% drop in Canadian visitors, businesses in the area would see a decrease of $12 million in spending.
A lot of communities that are really dependent on Canadian tourism are really suffering right now. They're really having a difficult time.
And let's drill down even more, because forget big splashy vacations. Think about Canadians living right along the border who don't necessarily even think about the U.S. as a destination per se, because they're just driving across the border to go to Target or Trader Joe's or to, hit a mall, see a concert, go to a ball game.
You think of Walden Galleria in Buffalo. I mean, you look at the license plates in the parking lot, and there are a lot of Ontario plates there each and every day. They're almost entirely dependent on Canadians and Canadian tourism and day trippers who just go for a few hours and spend their money there.
And do not underestimate the importance of this, because just to give you one example, county executives in that Buffalo-Niagara area say in February, their records show a 7% decrease in sales tax revenue. That, they say, is at least in part because there are fewer Canadians paying sales tax.
Certainly in my hometown of Buffalo, where Canadians come over all the time and they go to our sporting events, they shop in our stores. So sales tax revenues are dropping already.
And that'll affect fire and safety and police force and everything else. Sales taxes in a lot of communities, people don't realize, are paid for by tourism.
And this is worth underlining because tax revenue might actually be the most meaningful way in which a Canadian travel boycott could affect the United States. So think about it this way. Let's say this trend continues and there's something like a 20% drop in the number of Canadian visitors to the US this year. That would work out to something like 4 million people fewer traveling. Economists predict that that would cost the US about $4.3 billion in lost revenue. Now, the sales tax rate varies by state. On average, let's call it about 5%. So 5% of 4.3 billion, you divide that number by 20, what you end up with is something like $200 million less in tax revenue.
And when that's gone or it seriously declines, people notice. That's money that's not easily replaced by Americans. A lot of lawmakers are saying the current situation is not good for my state. We need to make some changes. We need to bring the Canadians back. So I think that we are having an impact.
Question is, to what extent, if at all, can the damage be undone? Or does it only get worse from here?
The government of Canada has updated its travel advice for anyone going to the U.S.
It warns that U.S. Border Patrol has the authority to search phones, laptops, or tablets with no reason.
Our old relationship of steadily deepening integration with the United States is over.
Now, if we've learned anything over the past few weeks, it's that what the Trump administration does next cannot be predicted. So ruling out anything as impossible is just foolish. But the trajectory is clear, and there is a cost to alienating allies. First, they were on.
We will tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens.
25% on Mexico and Canada.
Then they were off.
President Trump's tariffs against Canada will now be put on hold.
Then, while the first set of tariffs were paused, Trump threatens a whole new second set of tariffs, and then threatens a third set of tariffs, reciprocal tariffs stacked on top. But eventually, he loops back to the first original tariffs, promising they're definitely coming.
On the tariffs, is there any room left for Canada and Mexico to make a deal before midnight? And should we expect those Chinese tariffs, the extra 10%, to take
No room left for Mexico or for Canada. No, the tariffs, they're all set. They go into effect tomorrow.
And then those tariffs became real until they weren't anymore because they were partially delayed.
We spoke with the big three auto dealers. We are going to give a 1-month exemption on any autos coming through USMCA.
And then a big chunk of what was left of the tariffs was paused again. Here's how Trump justified it.
And I spoke to the president of Mexico, wonderful woman, today, and we helped them out with the problem they were having to do with the tariffs.
I helped them out with a problem they were having, as in the problem he inflicted and then paused, and then re-inflicted and then paused. Are these the actions of a man who knows what he's doing? Maybe not, but maybe. There are two main schools of thought when it comes to how Donald Trump is managing the world's largest economy. Either the pandemonium is planned.
Yeah, I think chaos is a big part of Trump's strategy.
There's a term that applies to what the Trump administration is doing, weaponized uncertainty.
Or
another possibility is Trump just likes the attention, just likes the drama.
I don't think there's a genuine economic strategy behind it.
Let's start with that. The argument that Trump has no coherent plan is supported by the fact that he sometimes has no consistent point of view. Take tariffs, for example.
Canada's a very bad abuser also. Vast numbers of people to come in and fentanyl to come in.
Legally, Trump has justified tariffs by branding the influx of fentanyl from Canada and Mexico a national emergency. But is that really the motivation? Or is it about boosting American manufacturing?
We don't need trees from Canada. We don't need cars from Canada. We don't need energy from Canada. We don't need anything from Canada.
Sometimes it seems to be about the principle.
Subsidizing Canada to the tune of over $100 billion a year.
By the tune of about $200 billion a year.
And other times it seems to be more about power.
I'd like to see Canada become our 51st state.
He feels strongly that it would be very beneficial for the Canadian people to be the 51st state of the United States. They wouldn't be paying for these tariffs.
And what about the occasional lack of a unified message? Trump's own team sometimes seems left in the dark. Like whatever Trump was planning, if he was planning any of it, was never actually discussed out in the open. Take what Trump's Commerce Secretary said earlier this week on Fox News about tariffs against Canada and Mexico.
So I think he's going to work something out with them. It's not going to be a pause, none of that pause stuff, but I think he's going to figure out, you do more, and I'll meet you in the middle some way, and we're going to probably be announcing that tomorrow.
Except this was wrong. 2 days later, Trump did, in fact, issue a significant tariff pause.
We saw this a bit in the first term, but not nearly to this extent. But if you were to put a timeline of promises backtracking, it's just a zigzag pattern.
And this zigzagging isn't necessarily only a communication thing. Sometimes Trump's policies just aren't properly thought out.
President Trump has announced new tariffs on China that remove the de minimis exemption.
On February 1st, Trump issued an executive order that taxed Chinese imports under $800. For years, those imports had been duty-free. But then, 1 week later, Trump completely reversed course because there was no plan for how the U.S. Postal Service was supposed to suddenly process brand new taxes on the mountain of stuff Americans order every day from sites like Temu and Shein. Packages started getting backlogged, so now this order is on hold until they figure it out.
It's the whims of somebody who seems to change his mind as fast as the rest of us change our underwear.
There's the constant drama, impulse control. If you want to make the case that there's a master plan, what is that master plan?
And there are countless examples of this apparent lack of a master plan, because many of the consequences that seem to invariably force Trump to take back what he says are foreseeable. The biggest example of this is how tariffs would affect the auto sector.
I'm afraid for both sides, for my workers, for the workers in the United States, but it's devastating. It'll devastate us.
Car manufacturing supply chains across Canada, the US, and Mexico are highly integrated and interdependent. Millions of parts and vehicles flow between the three countries every year. And economists predicted a 25% tariff would increase the cost to make each vehicle by thousands of dollars.
This industry has been integrated and grown together for decades. You can't unscramble the omelet one morning because you decide, you know what, you want to have a fried egg or a boiled egg. You made the omelet. You can't turn it into eggs over easy.
But it was only after Trump had dangled the threat of tariffs for 2 months and then actually enacted them that he decided, no, wait, I can't do that. I have to hit pause.
It's just a modification short term because I didn't want to hurt the American. It would have hurt the American car companies if I did that.
It was predictable to anyone paying attention to the details. I mean, the auto sector is so heavily integrated that, a piece goes back and forth multiple times. You can't build a car under these circumstances.
And the entire time Trump spends changing his mind, there's material harm to American businesses because they don't know which suppliers to use or what prices to charge.
What he's doing is he's creating uncertainty for people and companies that have to make pending investment decisions or future capital planning.
And consider one of Trump's most prized metrics for success.
Since my election, the stock market has set records.
Everybody's stock has done well since the election.
But nowadays, asked by reporters whether his latest pause on tariffs had anything to do with stock market performance.
Well, no, nothing to do with the market. I'm not even looking at the market.
Because the market has slumped.
Stocks continue to fall today with fears of higher prices and escalating tensions.
He says, I'm not watching the market. Like, I believe that as far as I could throw a Honda Civic, right?
That the one thing he will respond to is when the stock market goes down. The stock market goes down and he changes his mind.
But in the meantime, there is real economic consequences for doing this, for the uncertainty that consumers and producers take.
But let's talk about the second possibility here, which is that Trump knows exactly what he's doing. When you spend some time observing Trump, you start to notice more and more how he very clearly enjoys the persona that he's carved out for himself of being a disruptor. Like when he's naming those countries he believes treat the US unfairly.
The European Union, China, Brazil, India, Mexico and Canada. Have you heard of them?
Or when he's waving a pen at those same two economies who depend on the US the most.
They've been in the news lately, haven't they?
Or when he calls the president of Ukraine a dictator and days later jokes that he would never say such a thing.
Mr. President, do you still think that Mr. Zelensky is a dictator?
Did I say that? I can't believe I said that. Next question.
I do think that he thrives on the idea that we're having this conversation right now about what his strategy is here. I think he thrives on the idea that he's unwieldy and nobody really knows what's really going on.
Yes, it's this old paradox of how a bug is sometimes actually a feature. As in, Trump's leadership may not simply be a series of unforced errors, but rather an intentional set of moves designed to throw opponents off balance.
We see a lot of what they call the madman theory, basically make yourself look so unpredictable that your adversaries don't know what to believe about you.
And let's stop to consider who Trump might consider his adversaries. Countries like Canada and Mexico? Yeah, and maybe not just Canada and Mexico.
The United States has been ripped off by virtually every country in the world.
But also, he's increasingly singled out and used incendiary language against those companies that do business with other countries.
Well, a lot of them are globalist countries and companies that won't be doing as well because we're taking back things that have been taken from us many years ago. Basically, you have globalist companies that have been ripping us off.
And I'll explain where I'm going with this. Trump has always been transparent about one thing, that he wants American manufacturing to return to America.
America will be a manufacturing nation once again.
And he's always been clear, tariffs are a way of forcing those companies who would dare to make product outside of the US to relocate, to set up factories, to create jobs, to put America first.
He would, in his heart of hearts, like to have fewer cars built in Canada and Mexico and more cars built in Michigan and North Carolina.
So what they have to do is build their car plants, frankly, and other things in the United States, in which case they have no tariffs.
And so there's a strategic line you can start to imagine where maybe you never actually have to apply tariffs to anything because maybe the threat is enough.
He's essentially trying to intimidate or provoke some response that he thinks he'll be able to take advantage of.
And if that's the case, the rubber banding, the pendulum brinksmanship starts to make more sense. If he thinks this is the most painless way to get what he wants eventually, that the prospect of perpetual, unending uncertainty is too much to bear. So from industry's point of view, let's just do as Trump wants and move operations to the States.
He's a lot more willing to try things than your average politician. We've seen over the course of the last month and a half, his entire month and a half in office in the second term, that there's just less of a barrier there to trying things. The Republican Party has decided to kind of hand him the keys.
Now, to be both fair and clear, Trump's aggressive style has produced material change globally in a way that we haven't really seen under previous presidents. Just look to Europe as an example, how they're scrambling to shore up mutual defense and defense spending directly because of how Trump treats the NATO alliance. But turning back to tariffs, there are two complications with his strategy. The first is whether what he's demanding is even possible.
You can't move automotive plants in anything less than 5 years. You're gonna have to close a plant, you gotta break the supply lines, you gotta find new supply lines, find a new site, build a new plant, get your multimodal access and your power there, and that's $2.5 billion per plant that you don't have sales against to amortize that cost. These privately owned, publicly traded companies that begged him to pull back from the brink, he's going to bankrupt them before he gets what he thinks he wants.
But the second problem is that there may be a point at which Trump's adversaries stop riding the roller coaster. Canada seems to want off.
As I always say, you touch a stove once and you get burnt. You don't touch that stove again. The only deal is drop the tariffs.
We're going to ensure that the Americans understand how pissed off we are.
We cannot live as Manitobans with a persistent threat of Donald Trump's tariff tax.
And consider how differently the federal government has responded to this latest pause compared to the first time. After Trump's first pause a month ago, the Prime Minister immediately pulled Canadian counter tariffs off the table. Trade war averted. Whew. But his response this time?
I can confirm that we will continue to be in a trade war that was launched by the United States for the foreseeable future.
Now, the Canadian government has withdrawn a future second wave of tariffs, but has decided to keep its current first wave on $30 billion worth of American goods in effect. And come Monday, which is in a few days from the time I'm recording this, Doug Ford of Ontario seems so far to be holding firm on his threat to jack up the price of electricity sold to Americans by 25%. So if Trump does indeed have a master plan, what comes next?
I don't know. I left my crystal ball in the other room. I'm sorry.
I don't know, and he doesn't know, which makes it very difficult to negotiate. How do you play that game when the rules keep shifting on an hourly, daily, weekly, monthly basis?
But I think we can make at least one prediction, that whether you think Trump is governing by impulse or has calculated his moves, whatever he says publicly has less and less value. Because when he says he's going to do something, maybe he will and maybe he won't. Even signed agreements like trade deals stop being meaningful if the US president can simply decide unilaterally to violate them, or at least threaten to. Because when he says he's going to do something, maybe he will.
Yan na muna ang ating live, mga kababayan. Salamat sa panonood. That's it.